Hello everyone and welcome back to another quick guide, this time featuring the newly supported Melffys for Genesys. If you're unaware, Melffys is a weirdo archetype that is based on playing almost entirely on the opponent's turn. There's a lot of quirks to it, so we'll talk about it as we go. But just know that, one, I saw this deck and kind of was interested since it was getting the new support and it was low rarity. You can see this deck is dirt cheap, just on the whole. Uh, and I was interested in trying it, so I picked everything up. I just took it to a locals, went 3-1, which isn't too bad. You know, it's local sized, but my only loss was to Teller Knight doing FTK things. So I'd say it felt pretty good the whole time. So that said, this is the exact build that I took to locals, and then later in the video I'm going to show my updated version, what I would take today if I was going to take this deck again. So with that all out of the way, let's jump in. So we'll talk about the actual engine first. Serenemisia is a very important piece because this is always the card we want to be normal summoning. It is one of our one-card combos. And I say that with an asterisk because Melffy is absolutely not a one-card combo deck. The whole gimmick here, if you're unaware, is that we play almost entirely on the opponent's turn. That means that the deck just plays really weird compared to anything else you're used to. But we do have some stuff we want to do on our turn to set up if we go first and we want to go first. That's things like Serenemisia, who, when you summon it, can banish a beast from hand or field, including itself, to summon out an earth beast from your deck or grave, which is very important, with an equal or lower level. Then your opponent can summon a monster from hand if they want. Well, what's up with that? That's kind of crazy. Like, you're giving the opponent one card, or turn 0 combos. Well, that's because all of the old Melffys have an effect, well, not all of them, but most of the old Melffys have an effect where when the opponent summons a monster, they can jump back to hand from the field to give you some amount of advantage. So the idea is you can normal summon Serenemisia, banish itself, summon out Wally. If the opponent tries to use that effect to summon out something on your turn, that triggers Wally to then bounce to hand and E-Telly out 2 other Melffys. You can see that it's kind of a trap. You're making it a bad thing for the opponent to do that while gaining advantage along the way. I also mentioned that summoning from grave is important because we don't have a lot of ways to do that. I built this build to recycle resources quite well, but we churn through resources very fast, so we want as many ways to get them back in rotation as possible. So this card is incredible, and it's always what you want to normal summon. Next up is another new card, Melffy Rabbiz, not to be confused with Melffy Rabbi. Rabbiz is our turn 0 play. If the opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can special this from hand, then you can immediately fuse a Melffy using materials from hand and field. The fusion we're making is Joyful Surprise. This is the only option. Joyful Surprise on fusion summon can target an equal number of Melffys you control and cards the opponent controls and bounce them to hand. Obviously, that's just itself if you're using it as turn 0, and I tried that a couple of times, but going -2 to bounce a single card never once felt good. There is some argument to still doing the turn 0 play because Joyful Surprise has a different effect, where if the opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can target a Melffy in grave, summon it, and reduce this card's level by 2 permanently. So the idea is if you can summon Rabbies, fuse with the Rabbies and a Wally, for example, or a puppy, then you don't use the bounce effect, you just leave it on the board. If the opponent can't out it, then you can summon back the Wally or the puppy, and that's effectively full combo turn 0 on the opponent's turn as long as they don't have any way to disrupt that combo. So that's the good use of the turn 0 material, but honestly, it just never really felt amazing to try and do, just as a heads up. But Rabbies is also a quote-unquote one-card starter if you normal summon it, because on summon it can add a Melffy monster from deck to hand, and if you add specifically Rabby, our vanilla, You can then summon any number of beast monsters from hand to the field. So that's really strong because that, at a minimum, searches the Rabby, summons the Rabby out itself. Now you have two materials. Two materials is effectively full combo in the deck. But if you're like going second, that allows you to get a ton of materials on board just immediately, which is crazy strong. And the reason that these two are one-card combos, and if you get any two level 2s on board during your first turn is full combo, is because you can make Melffy of the Forest, which has a secondary effect that's a slow negate, but the primary effect is just adding a Melffy card from deck to hand. The premier one is the new Melffy Footsteps. This card is so important and so incredible for the deck. It allows you to add 4 Melffy names with different names from deck to hand, then it immediately becomes the end phase. The reason for that is that, again, all of the old Melffys have an effect to summon themselves from hand on end phase. So you can add 4 names and then just summon them all out, and you're prepared to play out your turn on the opponent's turn from there. This card is very good and very important for the consistency of the deck. The only downside is that when you activate Footsteps on a turn where you use this card, you can only summon Melffys, which does come up because we're trying to summon like Zeus on our turn sometimes, and those two do conflict. Then let's talk about just a couple of decisions I made that might not be immediately obvious why. So I'm playing 3 Melffy Hide and Seek in the main deck. This is a continuous spell that makes it so the first time each beast monster you control would be destroyed by card effect, it's not. You can also target 3 beasts in grave with different names, shuffle them into the deck, and draw a card. This is normally a one of, I believe, in lists. I wanted 3 for a couple of reasons. One, I built this specific list to be as good as I could possibly make it into Blitzclick, Sacred Beast, and Angelici. I think all 3 of those are relatively bad matchups for Melffy, but we can make them better with deck building choices. Hide and Seek specifically makes us a lot better against the Blitzclick deck. It kind of completely shuts them down. The second reason I want 3 Hide and Seeks, and the reason I would never consider taking out any of them, is that second effect, to shuffle 3 into the deck. The drawing is a nice upside, but just being able to recycle resources in a deck that wants a long grind game is so incredibly important that I loved every single time I saw this card. I'm also playing 2 Cattle Calls. These I'm less excited about. We'll talk about that in the updated version. But it's a quick play that allows you to send a face-up monster you control to the graveyard whose type is Beast, Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast. Special summon a monster from extra deck with the same type. It cannot attack, it's negated, it's destroyed on end phase. That sounds kind of mediocre, right? But it allows you to dodge targeting, which again is really good against Blitzclick specifically. And what you're summoning off of that is going to be Lalipa Way sometimes. This is a tech I figured out. It just gives you a level 2 tuner body off of cattle calling something that you want to dodge a targeted effect, which is fine. Like, getting a level 2 tuner is a good place to be. But the possibly better use is Melffy Mommy. That's not because of anything Mommy actually does, but because she can then just rank up into God Mommy for free, which searches a spell trap and gets giant based on how many materials are under her. So the fact that you summon out the Mommy negated doesn't matter because you're going to rank it up into a card that is then no longer negated. So the Cattle Call is pretty good for that reason. I think I'd side these, though, because it's specific kind of to the Blitzclick matchup, and I think we're good enough into that matchup without these in main, necessarily. Then for the non-engine, again, same thing. I want to knock out Sacred Beast, Blitzclick, and Angelici. 3 Ghost Ogres helps a lot with that. 3 Cyclones helps a lot with that. The biggest advantage that Melffy has is it is a 0-point deck core. You have 100 points to work with. You can play basically any non-engine. I'm choosing to play Ghost Ogre and Cyclone for those matchups. We have the one Pair Bear Scare for the mini game. It came up multiple times where I needed to reveal one, and it came up once where I got a destroy because the opponent wasn't on it. Play one of this card until they point it, at least, unfortunately. Ghost Bell was an idea against, like, Sacred Beasts. It never came up. I used it once against Branded, which was a matchup I felt pretty comfortable in regardless. I don't know that you necessarily need this. It's a little bit too specific. Ghost Mourner's a bit better, but still not my absolute favorite card. It's fine, though, if you want some extra interaction. It will have more points, and you can maybe just play, like, a Veiler instead. But the Nibiru's I'm playing specifically for rogue decks, because there's not a whole lot of decks in Genesys that can play under Nibiru. Most people are summoning more than 5 times, and most decks do not get free insurance. That's probably the biggest reason I lost to Teller Knights. That was my one match loss, is because I would open the Nibiru, but they could get to Chronomaly Machu Mech before I could Nibiru them, which means that they are insulated from it. No one else was ever insulated from Nibiru, and it just clapped them completely. This card, I think, is a house that is not seeing enough play in Genesys right now. Now, the sideboard probably looks a little bit weird. I'm playing Vados because it pops a field spell. All 3 of those decks I wanted to hedge against care about their field spells greatly. Same with Typhoon. Typhoon absolutely ruins Angeliki's day. I think it's important to have this. Now, I had a bunch of points, 30 points that I didn't necessarily want to spend on anything in main or extra deck. This is one of those decks where it's actually kind of hard to spend all your points, like Madolche. So I dumped in a bunch of Solemns to help out going first. I think this was incorrect, and they probably should have just been a play set of Solemn Judgment, because these guys don't actually help into board breakers. They just kind of help you stop an opponent easier. But Melffy doesn't have a hard time really stopping an opponent. We put up a lot of disruption, so I think this should have been Solemn Judgment for board breakers instead. But that's okay, we live and learn. Then I'm playing Kaiju Slumber and 3 Kaijus for it in the side for specifically going second. These, alongside the Typhoons and Vados, are going second plan. Again, into Rogue, I felt pretty confident. Nibiru does a lot, our main deck does a lot into Rogue, but I just wanted something extra just in case it popped up, and this did show up a few times. Again, against Branded, I Kaiju Slumbered them. The game turned into a crazy grind game from there, but it mattered. So that's the general gist of the deck. Let's move over to the updated version before I talk more. Okay, so this is the version of the deck that I would take today if I was going to take Melffy's to another tournament. Let's talk about some of the differences. So, first up, Zeus is out. Zeus came up quite a bit during our tournament, but each time it did, it was like wipe 2 cards off the opponent's field, but also mess up your own combo. So it never felt supremely impactful in a way that made me think it was worth the 20 points. I would rather instead have another target to synchro into, because on the opponent's turn, Penny lets you synchro summon with materials from hand. Obviously, that's really, really good, but games were going many, many turns, like 5-6 turns, and so once I used Silvera, that's gone. Like, I can't shuffle Silvera back into the deck. And I kept finding myself in a situation where I wanted just like one more option for a level 4 or level 6 synchro, and so I threw in Hyper Psychic Riser. So Psychic Riser is not a terribly used card, but it's really good in this deck in particular, I think, and that's because its effect is to make it so monsters with less attack than itself can't attack, and monsters with more attack than itself can activate effects. The idea is that it basically forces the opponent to go to battle phase and swing over the riser before continuing to actually combo, and that's really good for us because we are relatively vulnerable in the battle phase. All of the Melffys jump out when they're attacked, but the opponent can redeclare after that, and you're going to run out of bodies eventually. So you gain a bunch of advantage from them clearing your board, sure, but they still clear your board. Riser kind of stops that. And that's not even the only reason it's good. It also, if destroyed, you can target a tuner and a non-tuner with the same type and attribute and add them to hand. That means that you can recycle like Rabbies and Wally, or even Serenemisia Rabbies. That's really strong to be able to do. Even put Calantosa in hand so you can summon it off of the Fenny. Like, just being able to recycle more materials is incredible, and it's on the back of a pseudo floodgate that's really good for our deck. So I think this is a better play than the Zeus, and that gives us 20 more points to spend on other things. Namely, I changed up the non-engine just a little bit. I threw in 2 Perulias over the Ghost Bell. Perulia is just better than Ghost Bell. I threw in a playset of Evenlies in the side instead of the Kaiju package. The reason for that is the same reason for Zeus. If I used a Kaiju, then I cannot activate Footsteps the same turn. That's quite bad, and I ended up winning the game, but it really came up into Branded, where I used the Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, popped their board, but the only starter in hand was Footsteps, so I had to just pass back and hope that they didn't have anything. Thankfully, their follow-up was pretty mediocre. It got back to my turn, and I could use Footsteps and force the grind game, but just be aware that Kaijus are a liability here, and I think Evenly Matched is really well positioned because not that many decks are making Omni Negates. A lot of decks are making Monster Negates, and occasionally there will be like one Omni. You really just have to worry about like Varudris, or maybe Tellarknights opens their counter trap for whatever reason. But not that much stuff you have to worry about with Evenly. It's going to win you the game more often than not. Similarly, I took out the other Solemns and threw in Scolding. I didn't remember this card existed, but I was going to put in Judgments instead, read this one, and realized it was really good for Melffy. So this has to be the only set card in your back row to use it, but it is just an Omni Negate. It can negate a summon, a spell trap, or a monster effect, and destroy for 3,000 life. I think this is better than Judgment in this deck, not only because it's cheaper, but because Melffy, obviously in the main deck, doesn't use traps. They have 2 archetypal ones that are kind of mediocre, so the only things that can conflict with this are Cyclone and Typhoon. If you're playing against one of those very field spell reliant decks, I wouldn't bring this in maybe. But against everyone else, you can swap the Cyclones out for Scolding, and then you're doing pretty well. And then the last change I made is I threw in another copy of Penny. The one is recyclable, but one of the things I learned playing this deck rather than just theory crafting it is that you go through resources so fast that you're trying to recycle more than 3 cards every turn, and Penny's one of the more important ones to always have access to. So having a second one means that you can search the second Penny rather than always having to put one back, if that makes sense. It just gives you another level of versatility to what you search and summon and things like that. So that's going to be it for the actual profile. We're going to go show a quote-unquote combo where I'm going to walk you through what the deck does. I know I didn't explain the card by card, really, but that's because this is a deck that is much easier to understand when you see it in motion. Alright, now let's talk about what Melffys actually do. Our primary goal going first is to assemble 5 names. To that end, there's a lot of ways to get there. You effectively just want to try and get to a Footsteps, be that searched off of Melffy of the Forest or just hard opening the Footsteps, and one other name, which makes you have all 5 of the cards we care most about. Don't worry, because even if you just go to end phase with Wally, that is a significant amount of disruption, but again, in an ideal world, we're trying to get 5 names. Let's show you how we can do that. So we open 1 and Serenemisia, so we're going to normal summon the Serenemisia, banish Wally, because Wally will just come back to hand on end phase anyways, which is when we need it, because then it'll jump out to the board. And that's going to summon out Rabbies. Grabbies is going to allow us to search a monster, and we're going to grab Puppy here. Then we can overlay 2 for Melffy of the Forest, go get Footsteps, activate the Footsteps. That's going to let us search 4. Note, this hand right here is the 5 you want. Do not search Pony, do not search Fenny, because the goal with those cards is you want to summon them off of Wally, which gets you an extra disruption and 2 more triggers and a lot of stuff for doing that. So even if you have access to all 5, just get a duplicate. Just get more fuel for the penny for later. And then because of Footsteps, it immediately becomes end phase, and whatever we banished off Serenemisia comes back. If you banish the Serenemisia itself, it'll go back to the field. If you banish something from hand, it'll go back to your hand. Then we can trigger Wally, Caddy, and Puppy to jump out to the board, and this is our end board. Kind of funky looking, but trust me, it's really strong. So we're going to go to the opponent's turn and kind of play out a little bit of their turn. Obviously, this is a bot. They only have 1 normal summon, so we can't do everything. I can't show you everything, but you can get the general idea here. So we're going to let the opponent normal summon a monster. That's going to trigger all of our guys to jump back to hand and gain us some amount of advantage. You want to time these better, but knowing this is the only chance I'm going to get, I'm just going to use everyone, and I'm going to chain them specifically to have enough room for the double E-Telly on Wally at the end. That's because Puppy's going to E-Telly 1, and then Caddy's going to add 1 to hand, which will free up a space. So Caddy's going to add Hoppier here. That's always going to be your target if you start all 5. But if you don't, then Rabbies or Penny is a more important target. And then the Puppy's going to jump back and summon out Calantosa. The Wally can then summon both Fenny and Pony, which is going to be important in a little bit. Calantosa is going to pop something, and the Melffy of the Forest, whenever one of your Melffys jumps to hand, in the next chain, can negate a monster and make it unable to attack this turn. I'm just going to use it here because there's no other opportunity I'm going to get. Calantosa can pop a monster, and then because we have Hoppier, we can use Hoppier, target the Calantosa to jump out, make Merry Melffys to bounce a card. Cool, sweet, awesome, love that. Then we also have Penny. Penny can summon from hand at any time during a turn when you have bounced a Melffy to hand, and then immediately synchro summon using your hand as materials as well as itself. So all of the bodies you're bouncing are still materials to you for disruptions, and it comes straight out of the hand, which helps us play through board breakers and things. So we're going to use just 2 spent materials with the Penny to summon Desert Locust. Desert Locust, because it was summoned on the opponent's turn, forces them to discard a card, then can quick synchro with the rest of our board. I want to take a pit stop before we resolve this, though. I can't show you here because the opponent isn't going to summon again. But the point of summoning out Fenny and Pony from the deck is that if they summon again, you can chainlink 1 Fenny, chainlink 2 Pony. Pony can add Calantosa from the graveyard back to our hand, and then when the Fenny jumps back, it can summon a beast from your hand, which can be the Calantosa. Calantosa is not once per turn, so that just gives you an extra destruction. But you have to put both of these guys on field at the same time to really make it work. That's why we do that. So you would want to use that material prior to this next step if you have access to it. But for the next step, we're going to use Desert Locust's effect to quick synchro, use our 2. It's normally going to be the Calantosa that you've already used because these guys will be back in hand, whatever. But you can use the Desert Locust to synchro into Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon, who can bring back Penny from the graveyard or any other level 2 tuner. We also have Hoppier. If you've used a Melffy Rabbies, that works. Penny's normally the best, though, because it is water, which allows you to make the Gaimir Agerine at this point, which is why this is in here. Again, it hoses Blitzclick. It just takes a water tuner, which is pretty trivial to do at this point in the combo. But then you can tribute the Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon to summon out regular Stardust Dragon and synchro with it. We're going to make Satellite Warrior off of this most of the time. Again, Gaimir Agerine's an option, but most of the time you're going to make Satellite Warrior. That's because Satellite Warrior on summon can pop a number of opponent's cards equal to how many synchros are in your grave. And this general combo has gotten you 3. So that is 3 pops that gives him 3,000 attack, and if he is destroyed, you can summon back both the Excel Synchro and the regular Stardust Dragon, and the regular Stardust Dragon is treated as properly summoned, so now you have destruction protection. So this card is our big whammy, basically. You want to save this for the most crucial moment of the entire duel, because it's a pop 3 giant guy that floats. Like, this is our boss monster, quote unquote. And then the last couple of things that I can't really show you is the Melffy Rabbies, if the opponent normal summons, can summon out, fuse with materials on field or hand, which can be any beast and at least one Melffy, into Melffy's Joyful Surprise, which can target an equal number of Melffy cards on your field and cards on the opponent's field to bounce them. So if you summon the Rabbies, use the 2 materials in hand on this board, you get the Joyful Surprise, which could bounce 4, because you've got Pony, Surprise itself, Merry Melffys, and Melffy of the Forest. So you can bounce up to 4, and then if you leave Joyful Surprise on the field, it can also summon back the Calantosa again from the graveyard for another pop. So we just put up a ton of disruption with minimal setups and do everything on the opponent's turn. And I hope this has helped you understand a little bit more about how the moving parts work. Cool? Cool. And then lastly, I have exactly 1 game against an actual person for you. We won the die roll and we're going first, and of course we opened both Berulias, so that sucks, but that's fine because this is full combo anyway. So we can just normal summon out the Serenemisia. I'm going to banish Hopier here because we don't need it until the opponent's turn, so the fact that it's gone for this turn doesn't matter. Summon out Rabbies, who is normally the best target to summon off Serenemisia just because it gains you some form of advantage. That can search Penny because we already have Caddy, so we've got everything we need. Detach a material, grab Footsteps, search 4. I just get an extra Caddy because remember, you don't want to search Fenny and you don't want to search Pony. You want those in the deck when at all possible. So I just get a duplicate. And now we have all 5 cards and even Hopier already ready to go. So Hopier jumps back to hand and we summon out Wally, Caddy, Puppy. These are the 3 ones you want to end your turn with on field. The opponent is on Crystal Beast. But I see, thankfully, that they searched the Revolution Synchron immediately, so I'm like, okay, they're going for a Black Rose. So don't let them stick a level 4 body. And that's fine, we can make that work, because we have a lot of ways to remove a level 4 body. Like, for example, when they summon the Cobalt Eagle, we can bounce Kitty, and Kitty's going to search another material that doesn't particularly matter here, and then Puppy can summon out the Calantosa. Calantosa's going to pop. That's what Calantosa does. They normal summon Pegasus and use it to place Carbuncle. Okay, well let's go Hopier, target Calantosa. That's going to put Calantosa in the grave so we can reborn it later and give us Merry Melffys to bounce Pegasus. Okay, they go Golden Rule here. Is that gold? Yeah, Golden Rule. Summon out Pegasus, which is not a once per turn because it's an old card. That's kind of annoying, but fine. So that's going to trigger again, and then I'm going to take this opportunity to bounce Wally and summon out the Fenny and Pony. That's going to allow them to go into Doom Dragon. At this point, I stopped working under the assumption they were going to try and Black Rose us, because if they had Black Rosed at that point, it would have been worse for them than it would for us, because we can then, like, double Perulia, we still have Penny, we still have Rabbies. It would have been really bad for them to try and Black Rose after using that many resources. And I was right. They go for the Doom Dragon. Doom Dragon's going to put our Melffy of the Forest in the back row, and we're going to do the double swap with Fenny and Pony for Calantosa. Calantosa, I actually popped their Golden Rule because it's also going to pop the Pegasus, which just puts it in the back row, but that's fine. They've already done Doom Dragon. Then they'll go Rainbow Bridge of the Heart, and I could have dealt with this, but I'm running a little bit low on resources, and I wanted to wait to see what they do with it. And they search Crystal Beacon. Crystal Beacon's going to just E-Telly something back out, maybe like another Pegasus, maybe the Carbuncle. That would probably be their best target. I don't know Crystal Beast very well, but I know the general idea. But they can only use it if they have 2 Crystal Beasts in the back row. And they've used a lot of ways to put the Crystal Beasts in the back row already, which means that this is when I decide to rip the cord on the Penny play. So I summon Penny, make the Locust. They discard a card that's actually good for them to put in the graveyard. Cool, whatever, don't care. Then we can Synchro Summon into XL Synchro, bring back Penny, XL Synchro make Stardust, Synchro for Satellite Warrior, target all 3 back row. That means they're not going to get the extra value off of Rainbow Bridge of the Heart, and they will not have the materials to activate the card they searched in the first place. And that ended their turn. And remember, we aren't done. We still have Melffy Rabbies on board, which can bounce the Melffy of the Forest in the back row, as well as Mary, maybe itself, who knows? So we're still going at this point, but they're out of gas. So they walk over Mary, I let them do that, who cares? Then we banish Footsteps for its second effect, which is to put a card engrave on bottom of the deck and add 1 to hand. We're going to put Mary back in the deck so we can reuse it, and we're going to add Penny back to hand. At this point, I assume I've probably won, but who knows. So I go normal summon Rabbies, sorry, I can't mess that up. Search the Vanilla Rabby, which lets us summon our entire hand. Well, what's the good there? It lets us overlay for Mommy. Mommy can eat a card in hand. They rip Cyclone on Melffy of the Forest, I don't know why. Mommy eats a card, and then we can rank up to God Mommy. God Mommy searches Hide and Seek, which gives us destruction protection, but more importantly, God Mommy gains the attack and defense of all attached monsters as attack. This is a small God Mommy with 4,900 attack. I've gotten her to 7,000 before. So God Mommy's really good at closing out the game, as well as finding you follow-up. So with this board, I don't feel the need to commit anything else. We can just go, swing with Satellite Warrior, pop the Doom Dragon, swing with God Mommy for lethal. That hopefully shows you what we're capable of, and I don't feel like it was a shutout because the opponent extended repeatedly. They had an out to our board that we played around. They extended over and over, reused the fact that Sapphire Pegasus is not a once per turn a couple of times, and we still just had the material, we had the disruption, and we had the damage on the crackback to end it in a couple of turns. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. I'm not going to do a whole closing thoughts section because this has been a long enough video for a quote-unquote quick guide. Sorry about that. But the deck's really fun. It's very unique. I don't know that it's necessarily my favorite, but pick it up and give it a try. It's a $10 deck, you know? If you think you'll like this, it's probably worth trying. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.